Hold on, I'm trying to, something happened there. Let's try this again.
Okay, I see it now. All righty. Is my screen up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, let's get cracking. I hope I won't be before you guys too long. I'll try to make it as short and sweet as possible, but I also want to make sure I hit everything and answer, so I can have questions at the end and answer any questions you might have. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about.
Can I just jump in real quick? Please put any questions that you have in the chat box, and we'll make sure she get to them. So, and
Yes.
I might bring them up as we go along. So, but please put your questions in the chat box.
Yes, please put your questions in the chat box. You should be able to see that. And at the end, once we've gone through everything, I will take questions, comments, concerns, whatever you guys have. So to start off with, we're going to talk about the language as far as how we talk about mental health, how we view it, talking about kind of the stigma around mental health and how the language that we use can be helpful in kind of lowering that stigma and making it more accessible. We'll talk about typical behavior versus warning signs, specifically for mental health issues. We'll talk about signs and symptoms. We will touch on what suicidal thoughts and behavior might look like and what you can do about it. And lastly, we'll round things out with some resources. So the power of reframing. Basically, what I want you to get from this is that the way that we talk about mental health is basically the way that people know that they can talk to you about what's going on with them. When you say what happened to you versus what's wrong with you, you have changed the dynamic. When you say what's wrong with you, you're basically saying something is wrong. Can you tell me what it is? Versus what happened to you gives people the understanding that you care about what that answer is. What's wrong with you is very defensive and comes from a place of deficit versus what happened to you, understanding that there's trauma, there's lots of things can influence the way a person feels, can influence the way a person feels about themselves, about others, how they move, their mood, all types of things. So we know that trauma is a risk factor when it comes to mental illness. It's not the only thing. There's definitely a whole slew of other things, but trauma is a big one. The Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire kind of touches on this a lot. The ACEs questionnaire basically talks about different things that can happen in your childhood that have adverse effects. Basically trauma, but within that ACEs is stuff like divorce, children who are parentified, anxiety, having parents or even family members who also have mental illness, people who have family members who are in jail, so on and so forth. All of these things can adversely affect your childhood and can carry on with you throughout life. So when you understand that, then you understand that when someone is experiencing a mental health crisis or has mental health issues, it's not necessarily that there's something wrong with them. It's something that happened to them, and this is how their body has decided to kind of meet the needs of that person in a way that protects them for whatever that was. So this is just a fun infographic on kind of how reframing the behavior can look. This quote here by Ross Green, "Kids do well if they can," means that most students, most youth are not out trying to do the bad thing. They're not trying to do things that make you mad or that are bad decisions or that sort of thing. If they have the skills that they need to be able to make the right decisions, they will make those right decisions. So that's where we come in as the adults. So that's where we come in as the parents and the educators to help them with those skills so that they don't make those mistakes any longer. So this can look like changing your own mindset from won't to can't. It's not that little Jimmy won't listen to you. It's that he can't because of whatever type of thing that might be happening to him in that moment. There's a slew of things I can go into with that. But thinking of your student as willful or defiant, you can change that view to too many stressors and having skill deficits. We know that there are different skills that we have as adults that as students grow up, they'll learn those, but they don't have them just yet. In fact, we also know that your brain development isn't even complete until you're 25 years old. So knowing that, we know that a lot of that frontal lobe executive function where we make those decisions, where we understand our behavior, where we understand emotions, all that is like right at the front of our brains. And that stuff is some of the last stuff to really get rounded out in our development. Understanding he's not just lazy, but he needs help. Understanding rewards and punishments, which is something that we tend to do when it comes to different behaviors. Instead, finding those barriers to their behavior and removing those barriers so they can so they can make those right decisions, so they can behave in a way that is acceptable. Having that frustration and guilt and shame from a child's experience and transporting that into being supported and strengthened. So we know that when we can do that as adults for our youth, that they have so much more opportunity to reduce their own stressors, to meet their own needs, and to fill their own skills. So right now I'm going to talk about typical behavior versus warning signs. This is specifically in relation to mental health. The biggest thing I want you to take away from this is that you need to examine the impact of change. So when I say the impact of change, I'm talking about how you know what your youth is like. You know when they're moody, you know when they're sad, you know when they're hungry, when they're tired, you know that. And so when you have that sudden shift in things, when the youth goes from being sad to not getting out of bed ever, or not wanting to be around their friends anymore, or never coming out of their room, that's a sudden change. Especially when they used to be very sociable, even though they might be sad sometimes, they were still sociable. They still wanted to be around people. Having that change drastically is a signal to you to know I might need to look at this more. It's not necessarily a warning sign, but it's just a sign that you need to look at something a little bit more in depth. So you want to, when we're talking about the warning signs, we're also talking about different areas. So there's school, there's home, there's community. Are they having these same struggles in each one of those areas? Or is it just in school? Are they only having trouble with their behavior just in school? Are they only having trouble with their attention just at home? There might be some things within that environment that can be changed or monitored to help the youth get back to their typical behavior. And that might not be a warning sign. But if we're talking about that same kind of sudden shift in school, at home, in the community, then we know that there is some behavior here that we might want to take a bigger look at. So this is a good way to think of that impact of change. So typical adolescence might look like, they start to withdraw from family. They want to spend more time with their friends. They want to spend more time doing the things that they like to do, even video games, being outside, doing sports, whatever. That's pretty typical. But withdrawing from friends, family, and social activity, that could be a warning sign. It's very typical for adolescents to want more privacy. As they get older, there are certain things that maybe they don't want to talk about mom with, but being very secretive and feeling like they're hiding something from you, that might be a warning sign. Moving from childhood likes to teen pursuit. So this might look like, maybe I did like playing, hockey when I was, young, but now I'd rather, I don't know, play video games. This might not be a warning sign in and of itself. This is just a shift from, you know, the way that I was when I was maybe 5, 6, 10 years old to how I am now when I'm 13, 14, 15 years old. The potential warning sign comes in when they lose interest in all of their activities, and they don't want to do anything that really, that you know, brings them happiness and joy, and they're not replacing those things with something else. That could be a warning sign. All right, so now we're going to move into signs, symptoms. So in these next couple slides, one, I want to warn you because there's a lot of words. So I'll try to pick out the things that are most important for you to know. But we're going to talk about things from a physical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. We're going to also talk about behaviors and thoughts. Physically, so we know that the way that we work as humans, we have our mind, we have our body, we have our spirit. All of those things interwork with each other. So when the mental health is not well, the physical health is usually also not well, and that can go vice versa. You could have chronic physical issues that also translate to having chronic mental health issues. Some things you might want to take a closer look at, not specifically on its own, but in combination with a lot of these things. Gastrointestinal issues, stomach pains, vomiting, nausea, diarrhea. That's not necessarily just I don't want to go to school. Sometimes it's, especially when it's in succession, and there's, again, that withdrawing, that tells me that that person might be having a lot of anxiety. Think about yourself as an adult. When you don't want to do something, when you maybe have a big presentation at work, or maybe you know you have a conference with your child's teacher, you might feel stomach pains, right? You might get that feeling in the pit of your stomach that's like, I don't know if I want to do that. Or you might get, going over to cardiovascular, you also have that chest pain. You might have that chest pain that's like, oh, my chest is so tight, I really don't want to do this. That's anxiety. That's not necessarily a physical thing. It's physical as a manifestation, but it's because of the anxiety that you feel. You might have your youth that complains about having, like, they feel like their heart is beating out of their chest. They have a rapid heartbeat. They might even be sweating, lose sensation in their fingers and toes. All of those things are physical manifestations of anxiety. There's also aches and pains, restlessness. Those things can accompany depression. Even dizziness, headache, all of those things can come from any combination of mental health issues. So just be mindful of those. This is also talking about, when we talk about the physical signs and symptoms, we're also talking about the way things, the routine of things. So like this pattern adjustments. Do they go from eating pretty regularly to not eating at all? Or do they go from being extremely picky to eating everything? That's a pattern adjustment. That's something you probably want to look at. Appearance. We know that sometimes when we have depression, there'll be a change in hygiene. We might not want to take a shower. We might not want to get out of bed. With the overeating might come weight gain. With the undereating might come weight loss. In our females, you might also see like an irregular menstrual cycle. You might see that they may have had interest in different things, and now they no longer have interest in those. And for some of our bigger kids, for some of our bigger youth, some of our older youth, there might be some of this other stuff that's listed here. Emotions and behaviors. So this is, again, there's a lot of words. But I think for the most part, you understand what depression might look like. You understand what anxiety might look like. However, there's some other emotions that might accompany these things that we don't necessarily remember, that we don't necessarily know about. For instance, irritability and anger. Both of those things can accompany a depressed mood. Both of those things can also accompany an anxious mood. A lack of inhibition, that is, I'm impulsive, I do whatever I want, again, that could be the adverse of depression, a mood swing, mania. Lack of emotion, having that really flat, like nonchalant, but to the extreme. Like, I don't care about anything. I don't really care about anyone. Sure, you want me to go over here, whatever. Sure, you want me to stay here, whatever. Feeling numb. They might say that. I don't feel anything. That would be an emotional sign that we probably want to look into. Helplessness, hopelessness. I feel like no one can help me, or there's no hope for me. I'm just gonna always feel this way. Oversensitivity to comments and criticism, and this is coming from a lot of the time they're already having that negative self-talk. They're already having that depressive thought pattern. So if they hear anything that's slightly critical, it's reaffirming everything they're already thinking about themselves, and that can cause them to lash out. Behaviorally, you're looking at crying spells. We're not talking about, age-appropriate tantrums. We're talking about literally bursting in tears for very little provocation. You might even see tantrums, but it might be in someone that is a little old for tantrums. We talked about your withdrawal from others. Also, a loss of motivation is a big one for depression. They no longer care about getting good grades. They don't care about doing their homework anymore. They don't care about doing their classwork anymore. They don't want to go to sports. Who cares? There's no point in it. Definitely using drugs and alcohol. We know this is a big warning sign. Changes in energy level. That's a big one. Going from like high energy to low energy can be a mood swing that we need to pay attention to. It could also be that normally they're fine, and now all of a sudden they're moving super slow and they never want to get out of bed, and they're sleeping for 11, 12 hours. That's probably a big an issue that you want to look at. I think everything else here is pretty self-explanatory. Thoughts. So I talked a little bit about this earlier. Self-criticism and self-blame. So you'll hear this come out like, why can't I do anything right? Everything I do is wrong. Everything I do is bad. I'm probably gonna get an F on this. Why should I even do it? That of course accompanies also pessimism. There might be difficulty making decisions. You might see that where it's that anxiety comes into play when it's something very simple, like, do I want to wear white today or black today? And they're kind of getting worked up about that. You can also see difficulty concentrating with some mental health issues, not just the big one that everybody knows, ADHD. Difficulty concentrating can come from any number of mental health issues: depression, anxiety, big ones, post-traumatic stress disorder, another big one. So remember that it's not just ADHD. Racing thoughts, that's another one that's probably a big one. You might hear this as, I can't stop my mind from thinking. My mind is going like 1,000,000 miles a minute. Or a lot of times I hear this when people are having trouble sleeping, which is also, again, in conjunction with physical symptoms, and also in conjunction with anxiety. Having those racing thoughts at night. I'm laying down to go to bed. I'm tired. I want to sleep, but my mind is going 1,000,000 miles a minute. Some things are a little bit more uncommon, but definitely things you want to be cognizant of. Delusion and hallucinations. Do you see things that other people can't see? Do you hear things that other people can't hear? Do you believe things that are irrational and aren't true? Delusions. I think that I'm sure that if something like that would happen in a youth, you would probably be a little alarmed, and you should be, because at the end of the day, that's not something that we see a whole lot of times in youth. So that can come from a lot of different things. But also, I would say if they had delusions and hallucinations, you probably want to move on to something medical and make sure that they're physically okay. But of course, if the physical stuff comes back normal, then you might look at some of the mental health options. And of course, thoughts of death and suicide, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. All right, this is my time to pause, Patrick.
Yes, ma'am. So, sorry, I was taking some notes from some of the things that you were saying, so I got to get caught up here. If you're enjoying this series, there are other opportunities for you to be a part of the Suffolk Education Foundation. On May 26th, we'll be having our annual Gala for the Arts. And we're in discussions about that concerning COVID and everything. We'll be sure to keep you up to date. On October 22nd, we have our annual golf tournament at Sleepy Hole. And actually, I'm sorry, I think that's actually October 29th. On October 9th, we have our annual golf tournament. So we hope that you will be able to come out and join us then. And again, thank you to the Suffolk News Herald for being our media sponsor for this event. So back to you, Chiquita. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so you've recognized some warning signs. I've been going through these slides and you're like, wow, that sounds like my kid. What can you do? So, and specifically talking about suicide, I know that it's the S word and people really feel a little skittish about even saying it. There are things, myths about suicide, such as if we talk about suicide or if we ask our child if they're feeling suicidal, then that might make them suicidal. That is incorrect. That will not happen. What that will do is let your youth know that you're open to talking with them, open to helping them. They may have been feeling before that they couldn't get help from you. So having that question and having that conversation with them is definitely the first step in getting to a place of safety. So it's fine to ask the question, are you thinking about killing yourself? And when I say that, I mean, are you thinking about killing yourself? I don't mean, are you thinking about hurting yourself? I don't mean, are you thinking you don't want to live anymore? All of those things can take on different connotations. And what it is giving them the opportunity to kind of find that out. So I don't have to tell you exactly what I'm thinking. If you ask me if I'm willing to hurt, if I'm thinking of hurting myself, that can mean a bunch of different things. And I might say yes, because that's easier for me to say yes to than are you thinking about killing yourself? But I need you to be direct. Me, the youth, I need you to be direct. I need you to ask me specifically, are you thinking about it? Because that's how we open the conversation. That's going to be your cue as the adult in the situation that there's something I need to do here. I need to help this person. I need to help them feel more safe right now. So normally, if you get a yes answer, you want to move on to a few other questions. That would be, you want to ask yourself if you want, not yourself, excuse me, you want to ask the person, have you decided how you would do that? You might say, do you know what you would do? Or do you have a plan? You would want to ask, have you decided when you want to do it? Do you have a plan that includes, like, I know it's going to happen tomorrow at 8 o'clock or something to that effect, or I've just been waiting for you to leave home or something to that effect. Have you taken any steps to secure things you would need? So this would be like, are you stockpiling pills? Are you hiding knives or something you could cut yourself with? Are you, do you have, like, you know, if you're gonna use something more drastic than that, do you have, and you may not have access to a firearm, but it's totally fine to ask them if they do, because they may have a friend or someone they know that does have access to a firearm. So again, totally fine to ask that question. And honestly, it's really important that you ask these questions. If you get to a place where you understand they have a higher level of planning, that means they know where, they know when, they know how. This is higher risk. We need to do something immediately. If it's more like yeah, I thought about it, but I don't really have a plan. I don't really want to do it, but I also don't want to continue to feel like this. That's a lower level of planning. And that does not mean that there's no risk. Doesn't mean that they're definitely not going to do it. It just means that you have more of an opportunity to intersect and help them in a lower form. So in addition to the questions asked before, you might want to ask about some of these other things, such as have they been using alcohol or drugs? We know that using alcohol and drugs lowers inhibitions and makes it seem more accessible to actually harm or commit suicide. You can ask, have you made a suicide attempt in the past? This might shock you. They may tell you yes. And that's way more important than not asking the question. Knowing that they have can mean so many more things. That means that they know that when I tried it before, it didn't work. So here's something else that I can do. It also means that they were able to get away with it without you knowing. So it's even more likely they could try again without you knowing and be fine and actually maybe even complete it this time. And it's also good to ask about friends or someone they know having died by suicide. We know statistically speaking that when someone close to us commits suicide, our risk of committing suicide exponentially increases. So knowing whether or not your youth has had someone who has committed suicide means that they may need some extra support around them during this time to make sure that they are totally understanding, what happened with that person and understanding that this is not an acceptable choice. So this is more generally, this is not specific to suicide. This is really just a general understanding of mental health. You want to listen and you want to be non-judgmental. And that can be really difficult, especially as a parent, because I know you got to be thinking, did I do something? Are they doing this because of me? You might even get angry. I've given you all these things. Well, how could you not be happy? Any of those feelings may come up and they're all valid. But when you're talking with your youth, it would not be a good idea to kind of put some of that on them. You have to try to scale that back, understand in that moment you really just need to listen and you really just need to be extremely non-judgmental in order to get your youth to be able to fully express themselves to you. Of course, that when you are trying to communicate with someone and they become judgmental, they become critical of you, you don't want to share anything else with them. And that's exactly what would happen with your youth. They would completely shut down. They don't want to talk to you any longer. You can ask questions, but you don't want to push. You don't want to probe. You want to be very gentle about it because, again, you want to facilitate a conversation. You don't want them to feel like this is like an interrogation, boom, boom, boom. You want them to know this is a conversation. I really just want to be here to support you. More than likely, talking to you will be a relief to the young person. They will feel good about being able to talk to someone about this stuff. More often than not, they're walking around with these things inside their head, the world on their shoulders, and they feel like no one will understand. They feel very helpless. They feel very hopeless. Those things may not be true. They may not be helpless, they may not be hopeless, but that is how they feel in that moment. And that's the thing to remember. It's not about, is that true? Having that feeling of you can always come to me. What do you mean? That there's no place for that right now. At the end of the day, they didn't feel like they could. And all you can do at this moment is try to let them know that they can. And it's about them in that moment, not you. So trying to kind of, if it's like a breakup, I broke up with such and such when I was your age, I thought it was the end of the world, but it's not. I just got over it. It doesn't help. Their experiences are not the same as your experiences. You may have gotten over that. You may have felt like it was the end of the world. You might be right about that. However, they're not going to see it that way. They're just going to see that you're telling them to get over it. You have to understand their perspective will be different than yours. They're not a mini you. And things have changed and times have changed. We're in 2021. And so the things that our young people are facing right now are a lot different than things that we faced. So being cognizant of that and knowing that, let me just kind of try to see this from your perspective versus trying to put your perspective onto them. In this time, it's going to be extremely important to use empathy. So it's not about Um, oh, I understand how you feel. It's fine. You'll get over it. That's not empathy. Empathy is going to look more like, please share this with me. Please tell me how you're feeling. I want to be here for you. I want to support you. Um, and they might use language that makes you uncomfortable. So they might use, some words that maybe you don't really like. Not the time to chastise them about that. Now is the time to just be open and listen.
Chiquita, can I ask you to pause just a second and kind of dive a little deeper into kind of managing that internal conversation that we might have as parents,
Okay.
and understanding that what they may be talking to us right now is just the right here, right now, that often, and I'm pulling this from another webinar that I participated in, that often that's just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, or what we're finally seeing as
Mm-hmm.
far as all of the issues that have kind of been boiling and festering under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Am I
Yeah,
making
that's
sense
it.
of what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. Um, having, can I go back? Yeah. Um, thinking about things from that perspective, as far as understanding that your young person this might be the thing that they're talking about right now, but likely these things have been going on for them for quite a while. Most people do not wake up one day feeling depressed or feeling mental illness or feeling suicidal. Things happen. That's why we talked a lot about trauma at the beginning, because things happen that can create these types of thoughts for you, and it kind of happens over time. So you may just be seeing the tip of the iceberg at this moment. You may just be seeing the straw that broke the camel's back, but your youth may have been dealing with this. I have seen even, 1, 2 years, maybe even longer, that the youth has been kind of walking around with these types of feelings inside of them, and not feeling like they wanted to burden you with them, or not feeling like you might understand how they feel. So having the inner conversation with yourself is going to be it's going to be very important. So understanding, recognizing how you're feeling in that moment, but also being able to tell yourself, you know what, let me step back for a second. You might feel like you want to kind of erupt in that moment. And again, your feelings are valid. But what's important in that moment is supporting that young person so that they continue to be safe. So in those instances, it might take you a minute. You might need to take a deep breath. You might need to ask the other parent to step in. You might need to say, you know what, I really want to talk to you about this, but I'm going to need to just get a drink of water really quickly, and then we can dive right in. I think those things are fine to tell your youth, as long as you know that, and you can impart to them that you want to be there for them right now, and you want to do this non-judgmentally so that they can feel open and supported. Does that answer your question, Patrick?
Well, no, it does. And as a parent of a teen, like you said, you have so many comments that are running through your head, as in, why are you feeling this way? What haven't I given you? Or any of those things that, I just, I think, and I know that what I may be hearing, I know that what I'm hearing right now is just the right now. That if they're at this point, it's not because of what happened right now, it's because of numerous things, and I've got to dive deeper. But how do I get, it's getting past my own conversation to be able to have that conversation with them. So thank you so much. And I'm not trying to hijack your presentation. You're doing a
No, you're fine. You're fine. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That was good. That was good feedback, and I think the people in the audience probably really needed to hear that as well. So I appreciate your perspective. So here are some do's and don'ts. Some things to be mindful of when you're having these conversations, and when you're having that conversation with yourself. So this is the time where, you know, you want to start to replace some of the thoughts you may be having, like Patrick was just saying, with some of these do's so that you can move the conversation forward. So this is going to be having realistic expectations. So that means that just because you talk to them once doesn't mean that they're totally fine and they'll never have these thoughts ever again. And that even later that night, things will be fine. At the end of the day, this is not something that just kind of occurred once. So having realistic expectations helps you know that helps inform you that you want to be able to check back in. You want to continue that that same non-judgmental, that same openness to have those discussions with them in the future as well. You want to offer consistent emotional support. So not just for this moment, am I here with you, but I am here for you always. If you need me, let me know. And let me back that up. Don't say when you need me, let me know. When you need me, I'm going to keep checking on you to see if you need me. I'm going to keep checking on you. I'm going to let you know I'm still here for you, even when I think things may have died down, because they may not have. Giving them hope. I think that can be very simple. That can be as simple as just saying, I know how you feel. Can you tell me more? That can be as simple as talking about the future and saying, you know, not saying, talking about the future in talking about the things that they have already told you that they want to do. So you might redirect their thought processes to going to college or, you know, being on the football team or something to that effect that they've talked about in the past. That can help a young person feel hope. Providing practical help. So we'll talk a little bit about resources at the end, but this is probably going to look like talking about getting therapy, following through with that. It may be getting support systems in place at school. It may be, you know, letting the rest of your family know, hey, you know, we've been having a little trouble and I just need you all to be really supportive of him right now. Those things can help as well. Provide information. So you want to let them know that, hey, I not only do I understand what you're talking about, but I know how this goes. And so here's some information that I have or that I know about things that feel like they're the end of the world, but we can actually move past them. We can actually move through them because I have lived experience and I want to be able to help you with that. Acknowledge the limits of what you can do. So let him know, yeah, I can talk with you about this, but I think that being able to move through this is going to be kind of bigger than me. And I do think it might be a good idea for you to be able to talk to somebody, and that might be a therapist. Do not make promises you cannot keep. That is a huge one. I'm glad it's number one on this list, because at the end of the day, when you start saying things like, oh, if you feel better, I'll take you to Busch Gardens tomorrow. Or if you feel better, you know, I'll give you an iPhone or something like that. And you cannot keep that promise. That has set you up for failure. When you can't keep that promise when you can't keep that promise, now I don't trust you either. So now I know I can never come to you. Try not to give advice. This will be so difficult for parents. I know it is. I think the thing to remember about not giving advice, one, you don't want to say the wrong thing, and it's very easy to do that. But the other thing is not wanting to give your young person the feeling that they can't handle this on their own, meaning like they don't have what they need to be able to make it through this. You're giving them the message that you need me to help you through this when you give advice. So you want to try to stay away from that as much as possible. You want to give them the room to offer solutions versus giving them solutions. Very important not to dismiss their problem or emotions. We talked a lot about that earlier. And also focusing on right and wrong. I know that some people have said something like, you know, you may go to hell if you commit suicide. That's not really going to help in the moment, especially because if someone has already decided that they're going to commit suicide, whatever kind of consequences you come up with about why this is the wrong thing to do is only going to reinforce their idea that they should do it. So you don't want to kind of focus on that. You want to move more into a space of whatever you want, whatever you're feeling, I just want to hear about it. So this is another one that you, as parents, I think a trap we might fall into, which is focusing on the bad thing that they do. And using this as a moment to be able to say, see, you know, if you just lay off those drugs, you wouldn't feel this way. If you just lay off alcohol, you wouldn't feel this way. Excuse me. You wouldn't feel this way. If you would just lose some weight, you would feel fine. I can't express how wrong that would be. This is obviously not the time to talk about that type of thing. Any of those things may be true. They probably need to stop being on drugs and using alcohol, absolutely. But talking about that in this space is not going to help them feel hope about what can happen in their future. And also the trying to fix the problem, very similar to giving advice. You're giving the message that they can't handle this and that they don't have the brain capacity to be able to come up with solutions to help themselves. You want to be able to give them the space to do that, because there will be a time when they will have to do that on their own later. And you want to be able to support them now with being able to find the solutions on their own, so that later they're not always leaning on you. You need to kind of enforce that, you know, I know that you have what you need to be able to do that. I am here to support you versus let me just fix this for you. Especially, you know, we're talking about friends at school. Oh, you know, they don't want to hang out with me anymore. I don't want to hang out with them anymore. And you want to go to the school and tell them why they need to hang out with your baby. That won't be helpful to them. They will only be humiliating, honestly. Engaging in communication is belittling, sarcastic, hostile, patronizing. Obviously, this would not be a good time to do that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Alrighty. So the way that you can start to conceptualize what giving assurance looks like versus giving advice looks like. So advice might be, I remember my first breakup, I talked about that earlier. I remember my first breakup, here's what you need to do. Instead, you want to tell them, hey, you know, I understand breakups can be tough and it's okay for you to feel hurt right now. It's okay for you to feel upset right now. Saying something like, you really need to talk to a counselor about that. It gives them the message, I don't really want to talk about this with you. I don't really want to hear this. So if you just save that and talk to someone else about it, instead, you want to be reassuring. I'm here for you if you want to talk. There are also people who are trained to help you through these feelings. So I want to be here. I'm supportive of you, but I also recognize that I am limited in this place. And I also want to be able to support you to be able to talk to someone that can really, really help. Advice, you'll get over it. Just don't worry about it so much. Why do you care what people think so much? You know, I think we all think it, but again, this is not helpful. It's more helpful to let them know that they're not alone, that, again, just being supportive, being reassuring, being open. Also encouraging professional help, that last one, talking about therapy. So you want to be able to say, you know, let's look through Psychology Today and find a therapist that you might really like, that you might really click with, and make an appointment. This might also be some activities. This is self-help stuff that they can do. So I want to go back to that first step a little bit. The identifying others who may be helpful. In addition to therapy, what I'm also talking about there is other adults outside of yourself that may be helpful. So it might not be you, but it might be Aunt Sue. It might be Uncle John. identifying those people as also people that they can go to. Exploring activities that might help manage symptoms might be, hey, let's go for a walk. Let's take our bikes out for a ride. You know, let's watch a movie, redirect your attention. Find strategies that interest the young person. So, you know that, hey, this one thing that you do is something you really enjoy doing. You really enjoy painting. It might be a good idea for you to start, trying to paint out some of what you're feeling inside of you. Discussing self-help strategies with a health professional, and that's when the therapy comes into play. Definitely, as part of therapy is also self-help. As a therapist, I often encourage my clients to remember the things that they can do between the 2 weeks between the sessions. That's where the real work is happening. So you are able to help yourself, and I'm helping you with those strategies. And so you have them there, use them during those 2 weeks. I want to talk a little bit about resiliency. This is specifically saying resiliency in kids, but this is really more about young people, period. One thing I want to stress is that I think one thing we forget is that our young people are very resilient. Talking about this transition that's coming here very, very soon, where actually our elementary school kids already went back. Our middle and high school kids are going back next week. Huge transition, and there's a lot of grown-up thoughts that that our young people are going to freak out, and this is going to be awful for them, and they're not going to be able to deal with this. While I think there are going to be some transitional growing pains, I also know that our young people are very resilient. So remembering that and then also instilling that back into them is going to be very helpful during this time. So these are just some phrases that you can kind of keep in the back of your mind about ways that you can continue to build that resiliency in your young person. So saying, I love the way you always try so hard. Obviously, it doesn't have to be expressly that, but that's a good way to remind them, one, I know you try hard, and two, I love it. I'm so happy that you do that. That positive reinforcement, that goes a long way. Any one of these would work. Is there a way I can help you without doing the task for you? Of course, you don't want to say that specifically, but what do you need help with? Could be just as simple as that. You might ask them, what other ways could you approach this? Also, remember, believing in yourself takes lots of practice. Focusing in on them getting back to understanding that they have what they need to deal with their issues. They might need some support, but they still have it. And they still have that resiliency. And they still have the skills that they need. And if they don't have the skills, then you can help them build those skills. You've done it once, I know you can do it again. Now that can turn into kind of a defensive thing. So be careful of that. Not, oh, you had a good day yesterday and here you are, behaving this way. I know you're doing it for attention. That would be the opposite of building resiliency. But saying, hey, you had a really good day today and I'm sure we can do it again. Very simple. So here are some national resources that you can use to have further conversations and provide more information about mental illness. NAMI is a great resource. Also, I have here listed the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, SAMHSA is how we say it. And that's just got information about what substance abuse looks like. It has some I believe, kind of questionnaires to see if your young person might be abusing substances, or for the young person to take to see if they might have a problem with abusing substances. There's also the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which would, if anyone is experiencing any sort of domestic violence, this hotline can help them connect to domestic violence shelters in your area. And super easy website, thehotline.org. Also, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, I always encourage people to save this number because you never know when you're going to need it. You may need this for your youth. You may need it one day. Someone you know may need it one day. So it's a good idea to just have it somewhere where you can get to it without having to Google it. If you visit their website, they also have a chat feature, which I have noticed that a lot of young people like to take advantage of because chatting sometimes is so much easier than talking. Locally, um, the Western Tidewater Community Services Board, we have our same day access. This is where I work at. This is where I'm program manager at. We have our same day access. Same day access is our kind of gateway into receiving services at Western Tidewater. So if you're looking for any kind of service, therapy, case management, what have you, this is the way to kind of start that process. When you call same day access, you will talk to a screener right away. Sometimes we can order same day therapy appointments, but sometimes we might have you a day out or two, depending on what's going on. But definitely take advantage of that if you would like an additional resource. I wanted to point out here, there was also the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation. Patrick, did you want to talk a little bit about that? I know you had asked me to put in the PowerPoint before.
So the Cameron, okay. So the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation was who did our mindfulness webinar last week, and their story is a sad story, but their daughter Cameron had some mental health concerns, went to running to help deal with that, but she really wanted to raise the conversation on mental health. So that's what the Cameron K. Gallagher Foundation is all about. They have regular events that are virtual right now that anyone can gain access to. They're based out of Richmond, but they serve everywhere. They have support in Houston, support in Nashville, but there's all sorts of different resources that they have there and kits. So we really encourage people to check them out because they are just a wonderful resource.
Great. All right. So do we have any questions in the chat?
So I'm seeing lots of Beth Ann's post here. Let me see here. No, I don't see any specific questions in the chat tonight, and we're a little bit over. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you. I took just volumes of notes down from, and are there, and thank you for sharing all these wonderful resources. We did put all those resources in the chat. If you want to follow those links to help about those. But I think one of the most important things that you talked about, and you and I have already talked a little bit, but is kind of getting out of your own way. Hold on here. There we go. I'm back on. Thank you, Beth Ann, for reminding me to turn on my camera. I think one of the most valuable things that you talked about is, this is a hard thing for parents to understand that it may be nothing that you did, but you are the parent and you're the first, in this case, you're the first responder. And that's a big, heavy burden. And I know we're both parents, so I know we can speak to that, but it's just, it's big. Let's see, one question that did pop up. Cheryl said, thank you for all this information. So thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl, for coming.
But yeah, I think it's really important that we take that breath and realize that it's really not about us. It's about just being open and being wanting to have the conversation. And having witnessed it with some of my friends, you want to wring your hands, you want to pull your hair out, you want to scream, but you've
Mm-hmm.
got to remember um,
Mm-hmm.
to just take that breath. So again, thank you. This is extremely valuable, and I hope everybody got as much out of it as I did.
Me too, but you're welcome. I really enjoy myself. I'm always available. They put the Western Tidewater um, mm, website. I'm fried. It's Tuesday, 7:30. Um, so if anybody ever wanted to get a hold of me specifically, I can put my email in the chat.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
How do I send it to everybody?
I think you just choose everyone in
I
the
don't
drop
have that.
down.
Yeah, I don't
All
have that.
entire audience is what you choose, and then you just type it in there. Or I'll tell you what, why don't you just dictate it to me and I'll type it in there for you.
Okay, all right. It's C Merrill, CMERRILL
Uh-huh.
at WTCSB.org. All righty, well, that's all I have for you guys. If there's no questions.
No, I think we're in great shape. But again, thank you. And
You're
thank you to
welcome.
everybody who participated this evening.
Thank y'all for coming.
Bye bye.
Bye.